All right, hello, welcome everyone. And this week we're going to talk about SEO strategy. I came across a study, UpCity commissioned a survey or a study that found that as many as 50% of North American businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, don't have an SEO strategy, and which I found surprising because even though the SERPs have become more competitive and search data shows an increase in S searches for SEO services, I thought this would be a really interesting topic to talk about. And so I'm joined by Jen and Ian. Uh, Ken is in training session, so he sent his answers via video. So my question for Ken, we'll just jump right in here, was that, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but I wanted Ken to give us a quick overview of what an SEO strategy is. So here's his answer to this.
Okay, so a quick overview of an SEO strategy is SEO really is made up of a couple of different components. One is on-page optimization and the other is off-page optimization. So on-page optimization really are those things that you can do to your website, and the way that you uh, have the metadata and the actual written words on the page, the way you hyperlink between pages or to external pages, all of the things that you really have that are under your control, including how fast your page loads, your website loads, all of those different things. We refer to that as on-page SEO, and there are a lot of different things that you can do there. Like I said, you want to have your header tags set up properly. You want to use alt tags for your pictures to tell Google what the picture is. Those are also important for ADA compliance reasons. You also, when you're writing the copy, you want to try to make sure that each page has 500 or more words so that Google has enough content to really work with to index it for search. And ideally, you're organizing that around really a content theme. We used to talk about keywords and this concept of focus keywords. You can still kind of consider that, but it's really more of a theme now. And so you really, and ideally, what I think is, the page title that you have for your H1 tag, the main title of your page, really is probably the main theme, although Google may see it differently, and you need to realize that. That's why it's important to also factor in content in building out more pages rather than fewer, because the more pages you have, the greater opportunity it gives for you to be found for different search phrases. Now, let's talk about the off-page SEO. So that's typically referred to as commonly as link building. Link building, is where an external website links to your website. There is also the notion of citations, and citations are also very important. So I'm going to talk about links and citations. So links are really, you want to try to get authoritative websites that rank well with Google, that Google trusts. And every website has this concept called the domain authority. And you want to get these strong domain authority websites linking back to your website. Um, you can link out to their websites, but really the value for you from an SEO perspective mostly is when you're getting high quality links from external websites linking back to your website, because what that's doing is it's sending Google trust signals to say, hey, here's a website that we already have a lot of confidence in and think that it's fairly authoritative, and they care enough to link back to content that you happen to put on your website. So that's huge. Now the other thing is this notion of um, the citations. So citations are built from directory sites that are out there that, where you can have consistent name, address, phone number information and be listed on a lot of these important citation sites. Those all send signals. They're not true links per se, but they are sending signals to Google about your website. Likewise, mentions, so If Google sees that you're mentioned, it can send social signals, or it can send signals from things like press releases or news articles that might be published out there. All of those things factor in to SEO. So you need to have a strategy. How are you going to accomplish that? On-page SEO, obviously that's pretty straightforward. You just need to know the right set of tasks to work on. To really improve mobile page load speeds, a huge deal right now. The way you construct and build your website, big deal. How much content you have, big deal. Then you need to have a strategy on how you're going to get other websites to link to your website.
Okay, so one thing he didn't mention when he was talking about links is internal linking is extremely important as well, because first of all, when any search bot, Google bot, crawls your website, they try to simulate how a real person would navigate your website, which means they follow internal links. And if you have just random pages out there that aren't linked in any way, that's known as orphaned pages, and Google may not be able to find them. Now, yes, you can submit a sitemap to Google, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will necessarily index those pages. So internal linking is also a very important part of an SEO strategy. Did anyone else have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Guess not.
No, I do. I do actually.
Well, I'm good.
One of the things I feel really strongly about is there's a lot of businesses that see SEO as this part of your marketing, or I can just farm it out. It's that SEO component to kind of bolt on to my business. And I actually see your SEO strategy nowadays as, and there was a time where perhaps you could do that a long time ago in the SEO timeline. You can't do that. It's got to be integrated into your larger marketing plan. And part of that is you talked about content, Paul. Ken talked about a lot of the offsite and offsite elements, offsite and onsite, I meant to say. But even things like how you proactively get reviews, optimizing your Google business profile and sending content there continuously, your content plan and how you're going to, yes, leverage it on your website, but leverage it outside of that as well. I think your SEO is now like, I don't know a good analogy for it, but like a vine that kind of grows and is part of it touches every part of your marketing process, your sales process. And I think it's so vital that people understand that. So what I'm trying to encourage people to think about is don't just look at SEO as SEO, look at it as part of your overall marketing strategy, and you will be leaps and bounds ahead of the competitor that just looks at it as that's my SEO stuff.
Yeah, nothing exists in a silo, not anymore. So, Jen, the survey also found that about 34% of businesses have made it a priority in 2022, but 23% have absolutely no plans to create any kind of SEO strategy. And that kind of surprised me, given the current environment that we live in, where everything has really been pushed online.
Yeah.
And it's not because business owners aren't aware of SEO. It's just the opposite. As a matter, they know what it is. The search results show that. So why do you think so many small businesses have no plans to put anything in place?
Well, if we put ourselves in the shoes of these small business owners that we're looking to serve, listen to Ken's answer, right? I mean, there's so much involved there that you got to be thinking about. It just feels like, okay, perhaps can't even think about it. The other thing is that sometimes this is from our personal experience. We come up against. I guess I don't know if it's a mindset or a bit of a fear, and a business will have called their products or services something else than what a common name for it is. And they do that to either They think they're branding it without a branding strategy behind it. So that's a whole other thing. But they also, if you dig in, they feel like, well, our product or service isn't, comparable to the run-of-the-mill website, staffing center, camera, whatever it is. Ours is so much more better. And we do so much more than just the basic that our industry does. So we're calling ourselves, or they have these solutions that they package around some kind of fancy business automation, blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing is, so Ian and I just went through this actually, there's all of these, crazy terms that a business may use to talk about what they do. And you run them through the search results and nobody's searching for that kind of term because they don't even know about it. So the problem seems to be a couple of different things. One, it just feels like there's just so much involved to, we said we're going to do a marketing strategy. Now we got to do this SEO thing. And then now we have to call all our stuff, a very plain word when we do so much more than, say, just websites. So if we use, all of our businesses, for example, right, we do so much more than that. But if people are searching for that, why don't you meet them where they're at and then educate them along to what else they need or what else you can do for them? So, I mean, it's a long rant to your question, but I really think it comes in two different camps. One is feels like there's just so much to do with it. And the other feels like, well, we don't want to be called, the plain old word that our products and services are called. We want to call them something different. So, trying to get them to change and to see that, and then to build content around those, I'm using air quotes, right? Those basic words, those basic phrases, those basic problems, which is what their ideal client is searching for or is having trouble with. That kind of sort of education, sometimes it takes a lot longer to sink in or to have them really buy into than perhaps, us marketers would like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we've talked about it in the past that a lot of times a business owner, if you say, okay, what do you think people use when they're searching for your business? And they tend to use industry jargon. It's like your customers aren't using those search terms. And like you said, you have to meet them where they're at, because they're probably going to use those generic plain phrases because they have a problem, they need a solution, and they may not know what that solution is. They don't know your industry speak. So you have to be found for what your customers are going to be searching for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be, and this is just, I guess that's our number one hurdle in our years of experience. The fear or the apprehension of the business owner or the business being, we're so much more than that basic term. We're so much more involved, or better service, or this or that. And 9 times out of 10, they really are. But you gotta have that first conversation to let someone know how great you are, right? So it can be tough.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons too that small businesses don't have an SEO plan is this is going to sound horrible to our listeners, but it's true, is that a lot of the people they're farming out their SEO work to do not have an SEO plan for them. As simple as that, right? So that to me, that's a really good question for the small business owner that's listening to this and wants to engage SEO to attract and convert more qualified buyers. Ask the people you're talking to about SEO what their plan of action is for you and how they integrate that plan into your broader marketing plan. Because I would venture to say most small businesses farm out the SEO. They don't do it in-house because of the expertise required. But if the people you're farming it out aren't building a plan for you, that's a problem.
Yeah, there are a lot of companies out there that in the past their sole focus has really been social media, and because of the issues that have surfaced recently around social media, they've basically slap together a thinly disguised SEO program, so they call it, and they sell this at super cheap bottom rates, and at the prices they're charging, they can't really do much. And their main focus is still social, but they say, "Oh, but we do SEO along with that," and it's like, no, you really don't. But that's
Yeah,
how they're selling it.
Yeah, I know a business that we've been in talks with about helping them with their SEO and other aspects of their marketing. And in our audit of their business, we uncovered that one of the things that happened was their web design agency said they would throw in SEO, a year's worth of SEO for free. So as the business owner, and this is a big business, as the business owner, they thought, fantastic, like, check it off my box. We're doing SEO. When we actually dug into what has been done over the last year for them from an SEO standpoint, it's a big zero, like worse than zero, right? Like you're because you think you're getting momentum and you're not. So I think there's a lot of people, you were talking about how it's kind of the sexy trend to add on SEO to whatever services you offer in the marketing world. But you gotta, as a business owner, you gotta ask some pretty qualifying questions, and results are a good question to ask too. Like, what, give us some real statistics. Let us talk to some of your customers and find out what their organic return on investment is, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, part of it is just knowing what questions to ask. I think that's
Yeah.
another issue. But Ian, I mean, SEO does work, and there's a lot of studies that suggest that business owners know it. They do know that SEO works, but should they be combining SEO with some kind of PPC, pay-per-click strategy to create a synergy between those two things? And if so, how does that work? How does it happen?
Yeah. First of all, I want to confirm what you've just said, because one of the cool things as a marketing agency for businesses is we're constantly looking at return on investment for our customers, because that's how we actually create long-term relationships. We're able to say, hey, this is how much you spent in this area of your marketing, whether it's Google Ads or SEO, and this was your return on investment. SEO almost always outperforms Google ads, any ads, by like a factor of 3 that we've seen, right? Like 3 times the amount of ROI. And it's simply because when you do SEO right, it just keeps performing well. You just have to keep nurturing it and optimizing it and building out over time. You can't leave it alone. You can't abandon it, but it just keeps growing. Whereas paid ads, you keep paying for every single thing that happens on that platform. So it's kind of the equivalent of SEOs like eating a steak, and advertising is like high sugar, having candy. You get a jolt, but it's gone in 10 minutes kind of thing. And then you feel worse than you did before. But that's not to disparage ads at all. In answer to your question, when you combine those two things, especially, like, I'm going to talk from a Google Ads and an SEO standpoint, because Google's your biggest search platform for organic, Google and local. Google's also your biggest ad platform. And the beauty of it is that you're attracting qualified buyers because they're entering a search term like plumber near me, like leaky sink, like need an orthodontist, whatever it is, right? And so that's right there. They're pre-qualifying themselves by what they search for. And you can wrap your SEO or your Google Ads with those search terms in order to attract those people. And obviously there's other steps to that process as far as your ad copy, your landing page, how you convert people, all of that. But you can learn both ways, from SEO to Google Ads, and you can learn from Google Ads to SEO. For instance, say you've been investing in SEO for a year, and you're now thinking about investing in Google Ads. All the keyword research you did in SEO, you've actually been tracking the results for a year. So you know which are the highest performing keywords that are attracting good qualified leads for you. Fantastic. Why wouldn't you use that in your Google Ads campaign? And the exact same is true from Google Ads, is that if you've been using Google Ads for a while, you've ascertained a whole bunch of data related to hey, which ads and keywords are people clicking on to come to our landing pages, and which ones are converting the most? So you can share data between those two, and it makes both platforms and campaigns much stronger. It's like a 1-2 punch. Boom.
Yeah, it is. And there's a PPC agency, Solutions 8, that big company. If you're not spending about, I don't know, 5,000 a month, they're not going to work with you. But he released a video. Well, they do like a video or two every week. Really good information. And he released a video a few days ago, I think it was, that I watched, and he said, and the title of the video was "Prepare for Google Ads Failure." And he said, you're at some point in time, your Google Ads campaigns will fail. And he said, now you're probably asking yourself, why am I saying I'm a Google Ads guy? And he's telling me my Google Ads campaign is going to fail. He said, the point is, you cannot, because a lot of companies do this, whether it's Facebook or Google Ads, they put all their eggs in one basket, so to speak, that all their traffic comes from Facebook, and we've seen the the results of that recently, or all their traffic comes from Google Ads. And he said, these PPC platforms are great, but he said, if that's where your traffic is coming from, you don't control that. And if something happens, your business can fail. And Google can change your algorithm. Things can happen. And he said, you can fire me and go to another agency, but you're still dependent on Google Ads if that's where your traffic is coming from. And the one thing you control is your website. And organic SEO, it is a long-term play. Yes, so you have to have that strategy, that plan in place. But your website is the only thing that you actually can control. So it's really important to have that strategy in place. And I thought it was really interesting that a PPC agency, that's all they do, is he's saying, hey, look, if this is your only source of traffic, you got a problem.
Yeah. I think that's actually, honorable, right? You want to be working with a vendor like that. But, here's the good, here's the bad, here's how we can help you.
Yeah, they definitely have some really, really good insight, because that's all they do is Google Ads.
Oh,
so
wow.
If you want,
what's interesting too is just thinking through that, right? Like your question was framed like, how can you use the two jointly? I mean, it does bring us back to what I was talking about earlier about choosing your vendor, your marketing partner really wisely. Because again, if a lot of people throw their ads out to one vendor, their SEO out to another vendor, right there, you've crippled yourself, strategically, which is not a good thing to do. The other thing I wanted to mention too, you were talking about how you're at the mercy of the platforms. Another thing that a lot of people forget about is you're actually at the mercy of the market. So what I mean by that is during COVID, so when COVID hit, like with a lot of clients, we track competitive, how are we performing competitively from an SEO standpoint, a pay-per-click standpoint, whatever it is. And what I can say very clearly was when COVID hit, everybody woke up that crap, I need to get my digital marketing house in order. And so we saw some really dramatic increases in the investment from competitors in SEO, in pay-per-click, because they had to, they had to move how they were thinking about getting in front of customers in a radically different way, which wasn't radically different to us with our competitors. But what it does mean is, don't forget, you don't exist in a bubble. You exist in a marketplace, and you need to, if you're going to attract and convert people to become customers, you need to remember that, and you need to keep an eye on what's happening in the marketplace, and don't not be competitive. That's a lot of negatives, but yeah.
And everything has become more competitive, because of what has happened, in the digital space as a whole, and especially in paid advertising, whether it's search ads like Google and Bing or social media. It's become more competitive, and that competition has driven up cost. Your
Yep.
cost per click has gone up, your cost per impression or 1,000 impressions has gone up. And that goes back to SEO. Even though it's a long-term play, it's basically free traffic. I mean, you're going to pay an agency to put that strategy in place and do the SEO work, but you're not paying every time someone clicks on an ad. If they click on an organic search result and go to your website, that's free traffic. You don't pay for that.
And that's why it gets a better ROI in the long run.
Yes, in the long run, definitely. So my second question for Ken was that the study also found that about 74% of the business that do currently have an SEO strategy in place are either maintaining their budget or they're increasing it. So what does this mean for the ones that don't have a strategy in place, and are they at a competitive disadvantage? So this is what he said about that.
Okay, so in regard to whether businesses who have put an SEO strategy in place are either keep maintaining their budget or increasing it. Let me say this about that. So first of all, the world of online has accelerated even faster. And now that we're 2 years into COVID, behaviors have changed. People are using internet searches more than ever. And so, yeah, I think increasing an SEO budget is probably really a strong consideration for most businesses who are doing an SEO strategy. Look, just because you attain the position that you want to be, maybe you are fortunate enough to be in the top 3 of Google search results organically and maybe on Google Maps or both ideally. That doesn't mean you're going to stay there. I mean, the algorithms change, your competitors change, their investment levels and what they're doing changes, new competitors come along. All of these things, stuff breaks on your website. You just can't set it and forget it. You have to keep doing things. Part of SEO is just making sure that you're doing the care and feeding you need to do for your website to keep it as strong and vibrant as possible in all of the criteria that the search engines are looking for. But you also have to be paying attention to what competitors are doing, what the trends are, if people are starting to use different search phrases, again, driven maybe more by mobile searches now than ever. And even specifically, when somebody asks a device a question using a voice search, that is driving changes. And so you can't just rest on your laurels and think, okay, I've invested X amount for X period of time and I got where I wanted. It doesn't mean you're going to stay there. Now, for businesses that don't have an SEO strategy, are they at a serious competitive advantage? That's a tougher question because not every business can afford SEO, nor do they need SEO. I mean, sometimes a business literally needs a professional web presence, probably Google My Business, definitely the website, and then maybe a great paid lead strategy or a referral marketing strategy is all they need. Now, if they're trying to rank, then yes, they are at a serious disadvantage because they are starting at ground zero. They may be on the, low on the first page, probably on the second page or worse. Yeah, that definitely hurts. I mean, statistics show that the majority of people, first, they're going to select the business that they're going to find first on Google because one, that's a signal that that website and that business is probably very trustworthy. Two, when they're going down the list of high-ranking results and contacting businesses, they're going to do business with a business that gets back to them the fastest, typically. Again, statistics show overwhelmingly that the business that responds first has the greatest opportunity for that business. So are you going to get those opportunities if you're on the second page of Google? I don't think so. Not nearly as many as you want. You may periodically get some of those, and you may periodically show up on the first page of search results for a particular search phrase, but the volume of traffic and leads that you get to your website is going to be seriously impacted. So the way you address that is you have to have some other strategy. Lead generation, paid ads, Google pay-per-click ads are a great way to address this. Display ads can help. Facebook ads can help. If you're, again, you need to look at your budget, how much you have to willing to spend, what type of business you're at. If you're, if you're in a lifestyle type of a business, related to food, health and wellness, beauty, things like that, then you might be okay with Facebook ads over Google ads. But Google ads are like building a super highway to your business for a particular search phrase. So, it's usually a really good strategy to look at that if you don't have money for the SEO budget. And don't be fooled, SEO is not cheap. You're talking about thousands of dollars a month. It depends on your niche. It depends on the competition levels. But if you're in a decent sized market, you're going to need to be prepared to spend a considerable amount of money for a considerable amount of time. It's like basically you're doing the equivalent, even though you own your website, you're building the foundation of that in a way that is not too dissimilar for if you own a business and you pay rent for that building. Even if you buy your building, you're still having to incur costs. So to pay it off, and all those things. So SEO is something that every business should consider, but they need to have honest answers about what they can afford, and is it really the best way for them to spend their money?
Can I argue with Ken?
Sure, he's not here to defend himself.
I support almost everything you said there. Though the one thing I was chuckling because I know for some businesses SEO isn't as big a payoff as others. Like I don't disagree with that, but the bottom line, and I think he got to it, is that if you want to be where people are searching for your service or product, you have to do SEO because that's where people are searching for you. So are there businesses where you could probably skimp by and maybe not do it? Yeah. Would you always benefit from SEO if you did it? The answer is clearly yes. But I also wanted to comment too on kind of the investment. There are different levels of investment for SEO. There's also different levels of investment for ads. Most businesses that are running ads are spending at least $1,000 a month on them to see any real good return on investment. And that's low. Like I'm talking like some businesses we work with are up to like $15,000 a month because they get a good return on investment from that. But usually it's paired with an SEO strategy because they pay far less overall for the SEO. So, can you do an SEO strategy for $1,000? Absolutely. Can you do it for less? Absolutely. But again, usually I relate it to, it's like having a smart car, with a very small engine versus, something that's going to get you, 0 to 60 in a couple seconds. So the more you invest wisely in SEO, the faster your results will be. So it is based on budget. But I wanted to clarify that because I think that's an important differentiation.
Yeah, I think he was kind of referring to like the solopreneur, the small businesses where a lot of their business comes from referrals. But yeah, a lot of it comes back to what is your capacity to take on new business as well.
Yeah.
If you're a solopreneur, you can only handle, let's say you're, I don't know, a carpet cleaner, and you have your carpet cleaning machine, and you can only clean so many carpets per day. So what's your capacity to take on new business? And I think that's kind of where he was going with that. But yeah, I agree with what you said. There's different levels of SEO investment.
Yeah, and if you want to be a solopreneur forever, like if it's a lifestyle business, that's fine. But if you have growth goals where you want to be a carpet cleaner that tacks on 5 new trucks in the next 3 years, you're going to have to think strategically about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're definitely going to have an SEO strategy in place. So, Jen, according to the survey, some of the top goals for businesses were to, among others, but were to increase organic traffic, strengthen their domain authority, increase brand awareness, and yet 23% of businesses have no plans for any kind of SEO strategy. How are they going to accomplish this? Can they accomplish it?
I don't think they are. I think going back to our small business owner who doesn't live and breathe marketing every single day, and I think in the best possible scenario, they're thinking, I need a website, I'll blog, I'll do videos, whatever. We'll get stuff up there. We'll post on social. It'll be relevant. We're doing it. We're doing some activity. We're getting out there, away we go. But it goes back, I just think, and this is what I start to tell them is that you got to think if you're going to play seriously online, and by seriously, I mean and this is what I mean about it. Like every piece of content is going out there as a member of your sales force, helping your business, either answer questions or give a tip or share some information. And that little sales force is working 24/7 for you. You have to understand that part of your audience is not just your potential customer. Part of your audience is now Google, and Google has different ways of, deciding whether you're worthy or not. And in order to have Google help you, you have to play by Google's rules, or you have to make sure Google can trust you. And the way that Google trusts you is, if someone is typing in this phrase and your business answers or helps someone with that problem, how do I know I can bring you up in the search results? And I mean, obviously, Google's not a person, but I try to put it in because we can all kind of relate to more of a personal kind of, I guess, interaction, right? If you got to vouch for a friend or something like that, or you got to give a recommendation for a person, right? I mean, it's part of your reputation that kind of goes with that recommendation or that advice or that introduction. It's kind of the same way Google is, right? Google doesn't want to give you a bad search result. So you got to make sure Google trusts what you're doing online to be sure, like, okay, this question, this problem, this term, I know I can send it over to Ian's website and he's got it covered there. It's going to make me look good. It's going to satisfy the search results. It's going to satisfy the person who's looking for that information. And, we're all happy. So increasing organic traffic. So that's the non-paid. So it's kind of like you kind of have to back into it with the business owner. So how are people going to find you if you don't know what they're using to search for you? Like it's, forget about all the technical stuff. It's just like that, right? So do they even have a chance to accomplish those things? I think they're going to be doing a lot of activity. I think they're going to feel really good until they start to wonder, why isn't my marketing working? And then it goes back to, I know what we're all singing the same song on is, marketing is a system, and it's got to, everything's got to be working together, including SEO has to be working for you if you're going to play and succeed online.
Yeah, and something you mentioned about Google trusting you goes back. We talked about this in the past about the expertise, authority, and trust, and you have to build that in Google's eyes. And if you don't have that, you're not going to rank well.
Yeah. And I do, as we're talking, I just, because it depends. Some business owners are more savvy than others about SEO. And so, we do have some saying, well, I can still find my website online, like, okay, yes, you can. And someone can find you if they already know about your company. No problem. Type in your company name, up comes your website, probably. But what about all those other people that don't yet know about you? I mean, aren't you looking for more customers? And do you have all the customers you need right now? So that's where this is very important. For those that don't yet know about you, how are they going to find out about you? So that's where I think SEO can be a little bit of a mystery, to be quite honest, right? So
it certainly can be, because there's no formula for it. There are best practices. but there
And
it's
then it's always changing too, right? And then, so well, one thing I wanted to ask, and maybe we can leave this for the end, or maybe this will be a different podcast, but I mean, we get it so often, right? So you have your clients, and they've created this term that they call their products or services. And as it stands right now, nobody's searching for it because nobody knows about it but them, right? So last thing you want to do is be on a, first position for something no one's searching for. So how would one go about inventing a new term or a new way of describing their product or service? And then, putting in the effort to get that term to really mean something in the industry. I mean, you're talking a lot of work.
yeah, that kind of goes back to brand awareness, because you're creating this term to associate with your brand. But what you just said, that's also how a lot of these scam artists, they send out these spam emails about we'll get you on page 1 of Google. Yeah, they will, but
Yeah,
it's for
for
some
what?
term that no one's searching for.
Yeah.
So
No,
if
exactly.
and it goes back to search volume. If no one is searching for a term, then Google doesn't care.
Yeah.
Google cares about search volume, and they care about click-through rate. And that's how I think it can't think of who it was off the top of my head. Ian might know, but he basically sent out an email because he had thousands of subscribers and said, "Hey, search for this term and click on the second result."
Oh.
And within about 4 or 5 hours, that second result moved up to number 1 because of the click-through rate related to the search term. And it was really interesting. But that's everything with Google is driven by algorithms. There's they don't, yes, they have a lot of people, they employ a lot of people, but they don't have people scrutinizing every search result saying, oh, these people clicked on this, so let's move that up. It's all driven by algorithms, and you have to kind of understand that.
Yeah, and if I could add a little bit to that too, I think it's an interesting question, Jen, because what you're talking about is subject matter expertise, creating a term that then becomes synonymous with either your solution or a general industry concept.
Kleenex
And
comes to mind.
well, yeah, but we're even talking, I think, probably from a B2B standpoint.
Yeah, more service,
right?
like a service, a service solution. And what do you call it, right?
Yeah. So I think you're talking about one, behavior change, right? So you're talking about, well, how do we get people to search for this term or to even understand that this term is relevant to their life? And I think, the first thing that comes to mind is, wrapping your marketing in authority type building stuff. So I wouldn't even suggest like this is a very long-term play.
Oh,
because what you're doing is, building out TED Talks, presenting at associations, because you're trying to get your main buyers in those associations, in those industries, to start to think differently. And that's a huge, you're turning the Titanic, right? You're not, it's not a powerboat that you're like, zip, oh, they're searching for this, zip, let's get in front of them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big task. And, because it's wrapped in this SEO question, it won't matter at all from an SEO standpoint until people search for it. I mean, you can build the authority on your website, and I think you should, if a company is that committed to the idea that this is kind of our beachhead or our one of our pillars of our business, and this will become synonymous sometime with this type of service. But I think that's, again, a very long-term play, and you can still talk about it on your website. So you're indoctrinating people in a nice way about that. But yeah, that's from my viewpoint anyways. I don't know how you speed up that process or if it's that relevant to SEO yet.
Well, and that's interesting too, because you're kind of putting another hurdle in your way, right? I mean, like, first of all, you want the customer for your product or services, but then before they get there, they have to call it this. It's like,
Yeah.
come on. Do you want to do business, or do you want to do you
Well,
want your own search term, right?
Donald Miller, who wrote StoryBrand, he has a great term, and it's if you confuse, you lose, right? As a business. And I think that's a really good term, because he wraps it in studies and data about how if you actually make people use too much brain power, they go somewhere else, because they're like, this is taking too much of my mental energy. So I think that's a concept a business like that needs to think about is, we need to be where people are searching for us now. And can we build up that term over time? Probably, but will it become synonymous in the industry like Kleenex, as Paul mentioned? Time will tell.
Time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, and it back to what you said, Ian, about too much mental energy. You see that all the time. If you have a long, complicated contact form on your website with all these required fields, people say, screw this. And they don't bother. That is why if you look at opt-in forms, generally, what is it? Name, email, that's it. Because people are more likely to fill that out than if you're asking them 15 questions. Now, if it's a survey or a quiz, that's one thing. But if someone has to fill out 30 fields on a contact form to get in touch with you, they're not going to do it. It's just not going to happen.
I agree.
Yeah, unless they're so committed, like if they're far enough through the buyer's journey that they're now at I know these guys, I like these guys, I trust these guys, I'm trying them. And in order to go the next step, like I'm that committed now that these guys are in my decision set, I think that's when you can ask the more longer form questions, because the value exchange is that much greater. They see that, if I do this form, because the data I'm providing this company is actually going to be fed back to me in valued recommendations or something like that. It's going to make my meeting more valuable with this company. Then they'll do that. But yeah, if you jump the gun and, try to marry someone on your first date, that's a recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah, and one of the places we have seen the long forms work is, we have painters for clients, and a lot of times people want virtual estimates. Well, they need certain information to give you that virtual estimate, and people will fill that out. If they want a virtual estimate, they will fill that form out. But kind of goes back to what you said. They're committed to that. They're like, I don't want them coming out here to give me an estimate. I want it virtually. And in order to do that, this is the information they need. So in that case, I have seen it work, but that's beyond a simple contact form in that instance.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, Ian, I've read that one of the reasons, among others, that small businesses don't have an SEO strategy is they basically don't realize they need one. They might be doing some things randomly from an SEO perspective, and they might think it's a strategy, but obviously it's not. So how would a strategy help them strengthen what they're doing? And is technical SEO part of an SEO strategy?
Yeah. There's a few questions in there. First,
I tried to stack them for you.
Yeah. No, I like that. I'll try to be fast answering them. First of all, I think I almost feel compelled to say how disappointed I am in our industry as a whole, because if business owners don't understand a strategy is required, that's because the people in the industry who do SEO aren't talking enough about that. And it's become almost, in a sense, commoditized, right? I just need SEO. So I just pay someone, SEO happens magically. I don't need a strategy. So that I talked a little bit about that previously, but I think that's an important thing that we need to own as an industry. Like, we need to talk about strategy. I'll actually answer your last question first, and that was about is technical SEO, should it be part of your SEO strategy? Absolutely, it has to be, and that's actually a really key place that a lot of SEO falls apart, because the people that are kind of dabbling in SEO, like they've got all the right bullet points on their website about, yes, we do SEO, but they're not, if they're not technically, if they don't have the technical expertise, they're going to fall short. And part of that, it's going to negatively impact your search results, which negatively impacts your business because you want qualified buyers to come to your site to buy from you. But there's technical aspects of SEO that have to be done properly. And I think Google's really pressured the industry to understand this now with their Google Core Web Vitals algorithm change that they put in place June and July of last year, because it's actually telling you as a business, and you can run these reports straight from Google PageSpeed that say there are these 3 aspects of your website technically that are not meeting what they should meet in order to give a good experience to visitors to your website. And those are very technical. Like, you cannot solve these problems if you don't understand how to technically do it. But then there's lots of other things on your website as far as like how to technically do SEO with meta descriptions and title tags and schema, and like there's all these things that keep, as you layer them into your SEO strategy, they give you more and more return on investment. And if you just do kind of like the minimum of SEO, you will not see the great results. Especially, again, you don't live in a bubble. Your business doesn't live in a bubble. So if your competitor is doing the technical side of it, and you're not, you're going to lose. I would even say keyword research, even though that's not really classified as a technical part, it's a place that a lot of SEO falls apart, because and somebody alluded to it earlier. I think it was you, Paul, where SEO companies will send out a report, and it's like 30 keywords that you rank for #1 spot on, but nobody searches for them. So great, I'm #1 for something that gets no traffic. What's the point of that, right? So again, I think you have to be strategically minded and technically relevant in order to really win at it. The other question you asked was, how will an SEO strategy help your business? Simply put, you create an SEO strategy, you integrate it fully into your marketing plan. You're creating a powerhouse in your overall marketing in your business. You'll show up higher in Google search results. You'll attract more qualified leads. You'll attract more leads that want to buy. You'll optimize your website properly so it will perform better. You'll create content that Google loves and people devour. That was actually the subtitle of the book we wrote on content marketing. Just slipping it in there. And the content you'll be creating will be leveraged throughout your sales and your marketing processes to increase conversions and retention. So not only are you creating content that's great for SEO because Google loves it, people love it, they stay on your website, they devour it, you're actually creating the gas that you'll use throughout the rest of your engines, your marketing engines, with that content. And having an SEO strategy will empower you to measure your SEO, your organic results, to make it better, to continually optimize it, and to watch how the competition is performing and beat them. So I think the key to developing and implementing a great SEO strategy that will attract and convert customers is really to hire somebody with expertise, or like hire them internally if they're like SEO fantastic, but then have a bigger plan, make sure it fits within the bigger plan strategically. But whether they're internally or externally hired, make sure that they're strategic and that they have a SEO plan, but then also that it fits into the bigger strategic marketing plan. And I think as a business owner, you'll achieve all those things I was talking about what an SEO strategy can do for you.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about the technical part, about Google kind of forcing awareness, and I think that's a definitely good point. And I think part of the reason that it gets overlooked, and we've actually had this happen, because humans by nature are visual creatures, and we do the schema and the technical aspects, and we've actually had cuts. Well, what did you do? We can't see that. Well, no, you can't. But Google definitely sees it. Okay. And I think that's part of the issue is that they can't see it. Technical SEO is not part of a pretty website. Yes, you need a good looking functional website, but you have to have those technical aspects in place. But that's not something that you can see. Google sees it, search engines see it from a technical perspective, but the business owner can't see it. So they're like, well, what have you done? How much time do you have? So I can explain it to you.
Yeah, and I think that's where the measurement and reporting can be very powerful, because just like with a car, you're not looking at the engine of your car every day. Even when you take it into the mechanic, you actually don't look at the engine of your car usually, or whatever part they replaced. You drive it and you're like, well, it's driving great. Everything feels good. It's taking me where I want to go. And I think that's where your tracking and your reporting and your measurement of ROI is like, it's taking me where I want to go. I actually don't care about how it's doing it, as long as incrementally the results are getting better and better and I'm beating my competition.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. It's been almost an hour, right at an hour. So I hope this was helpful to everyone. Hope you learned something, and we will see you next week.